Ladies and gentlemen, we are here at the third Best Practices session at the Global Korea Convention 2021. The speaker is from Korea LH Corporation, and the speaker will talk about the introduction of case studies in entering Vietnam. Speaker is Mr. Joon. Please greet him with a big round of applause.
Good afternoon. I am from LH, Korea Land and Housing Corporation, and I am Joon, Deputy Head of the Global Business Division. I'd like to begin with a short self-introduction. I've been working at LH for about 15 years now. And I've been in charge of various different businesses, and recently we have gone into Vietnam. We've had this project for the past 5 years, and I worked in Vietnam for about 3 years as a resident employee of LH. And so I'd like to share with you this experience that I've had working on this Vietnamese project, as well as some impressions that I have received. So, the title of my presentation is Introduction of Case Studies in Entering Vietnam. Particularly, I will be focusing on the Korean-Vietnam Economic Cooperation Industrial Complex. As for the contents of my presentation, I will begin with talking about the changes in the business environment, the current state of our project, and our future strategy. First is on changes in the business environment in Vietnam. As you know well, the official name of Vietnam is the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, and the land area is about 1.5 times that of the Korean Peninsula, and the population is almost 100 million. In terms of the political system, they have a socialism-based market economy system that they are operating right now. And in Vietnam, one unique characteristic is that the Communist Party is the only political party that is leading the nation and society. As for the heads of state, the most top-ranking head of state is the General Secretary of the Communist Party, Nguyen Phu Trong, and the president is ranked at number 2. He used to be the prime minister, but Nguyen Xuan Phuc has become president since last year, and its prime minister is Pham Minh Chinh. As for the COVID situation in Vietnam, prior to April 27 of last year, the COVID situation was quite stable, but since April, there's been a spread of COVID, particularly in the southern region, and they reached about 10,000 confirmed cases per day, but now it is at about 4,000 to 5,000 confirmed cases per day, so it has stabilized somewhat. So Vietnam has also transitioned to living their daily lives with COVID recently. And I have a list of key words that are important in understanding the country. As you know well, filial piety is an important value of the country, and also chopsticks and Hanoi vodka, or drinking until the end culture is very important. There are not that many countries that use chopsticks, but for Vietnam, it has very good hand skills because of this use of chopsticks, and they ride a lot of motorcycles. And so in Vietnam, I think there's always the culture of being very hurried and trying to do everything very quickly. So the 1980s and 90s culture that we found here in Korea is still present in Vietnam today. Next, I'd like to compare the legislation system between our two countries. This is just for your reference. But in the case of Korea, we have the constitution, the legislation system under that, and then the presidential decrees. And if you compare it with Vietnam, Vietnam also has its constitution, but they have a national assembly, and they go through the legislation process at the National Assembly as well. But what was most difficult for us as we tried to do business was that there were a lot of different local authorities, local governments, and in all of the different localities, we had to go through the approval process of each of the levels of government at the local councils. And so we had to understand this different system that Vietnam has before deciding to go into business cooperation. And so this is an important thing to understand about the country if you are considering doing business in Vietnam. This shows you the national organizational chart of Vietnam, and you will see that there are some similarities with Korea as well as more complicated organizations. So they have the Communist Party Central Executive Committee, and they also have the three branches of the government here. And then here you will find that the Communist Party and its affiliated organizations have a strong hold in national affairs. Next, I'd like to talk about why Vietnam for doing business. So these are the key words on Vietnam. The first is that it could be an alternative to China. Because of changes in the economic environment in China right now, there's been a high rise in the minimum income, minimum wage there. And because of the worsening of the U.S. Sino trade war, there's been a movement out of China, and the spread of COVID has been another factor. A second keyword for Vietnam is that it is a hub going into ASEAN. So ASEAN has a huge potential, and so Vietnam can be a leader in Indo-China affairs and be a hub for going into the massive ASEAN market. And Vietnam has a very high economic growth rate. It's at 6 to 7% per annum, and they have very abundant young, good quality labor force available. And that is why Vietnam is being favored by Korean businesses. And so Vietnam's importance as a new global production base continues to rise. So why do business in Vietnam? Another reason is that there's a speeding up of its economy into the global economy. As you can see on this chart on the right, in terms of the RCEP, which Korea is pursuing, or FTA with Europe, or in APEC, Vietnam is a member and party to all of these different organizations. And in the TPP, Vietnam is a member as well. Vietnam today, well, its TPP went into effect in 2019. Vietnam EU FTA also went into effect as of August of last year. And so in terms of the trading environment, there has been a lot of FTA signing as well as other improvements which has accelerated its incorporation into the global economy. And so it seems that many countries around the world are sending a lot of positive messages and are willing to cooperate with Vietnam. And in terms of our bilateral relationship, as of 1988 to 2019, the FDI, accumulated FDI, has reached $351.6 billion. And so it says here that Vietnam is very attractive, and there are several reasons behind why Vietnam has become a very attractive destination for doing business. First is that it has a very high proportion of the younger generation. In the case of Korea, we are already an aged society, but then for Vietnam, its workforce, in its population, 70% of its population are still part of the workforce. And so for the next 10-20 years, they're going to have abundant supply of labor force. The second quality is that Vietnam has a very stable socialist system. Among the Asian countries, particularly among the 10 ASEAN countries, it has a very stable political system, relatively speaking, and it has good public order in the country, which is another attractive point for Vietnam. The third is that previously there were a lot of textile and sewing industries that it had fostered, but the industrial trend has changed a little bit recently. So we've had Samsung Electronics, LG Electronics go into Vietnam, and so it has become the center of electronic and electric industries. And Samsung Electronics, for example, takes up 25% of Vietnam's exports. And the fourth factor is that minimum wage growth rate has been on the decline. Between 2015, 2016, 2017, we had the very high minimum wage growth in Vietnam. But then there was some concern about this wage growth rate leading to the exit of many international businesses. And so the government has stepped in, particularly with the onset of COVID. The minimum wage growth rate has been frozen at 0% by the government. And so Vietnam is working very hard to maintain or increase FDI, even at the expense of controlling minimum wage growth. If you look at our relations with Korea, Korea is the fourth exporting country of Vietnam and the second importing country. And this relationship is becoming stronger. Next, I'd like to talk about our business in Vietnam and the current situation. First is the Korea-Vietnam Economic Cooperation Industrial Complex. And from 2017, I have been participating in this complex construction project. As for the purpose of engaging in this cooperation with Vietnam, well, it began with our intention to assist Korean companies that wanted to launch into Vietnam. In fact, there were a lot of Korean businesses that were already doing business in Vietnam, but they were faced with many difficult issues, such as securing factory land, for example. And so we wanted to provide a stable supply of land for the Korean businesses in in Vietnam. And so we began this project. And then I will show you the location of our complex. In terms of the size, it's about 430,000 kyung. And the location is about 30 kilometers away from Hanoi. It's in Hong Yen Province, which is again about 30 kilometers away from Hanoi. And from the Hanoi Noi Bai airport, you can reach this area in 1 hour. And we have LG Electronics, Samsung Electronics, and Hyundai Motors, all in the southeast area. So in terms of the location, it has excellent qualities. And there's a Haipung port and highway. Haipung port is something like the Incheon port in Korea. And so in this highway, it's located in the first interchange. And so in terms of logistics and connection with the highway, it has excellent characteristics. And so we decided that this would be the optimal place for this industrial complex. As for the budget, it's about 91 billion won, and the project period is from 2020 to 2069. So it will be a 7-year project, and we'll be leasing out this complex for 50 years to the Korean companies. In terms of the business structure, or the project structure, we formed an LH consortium and we established a entity in Vietnam to carry out the project. As for the background of this project, again, in March of 2020, we concluded the MOU, and in June of the same year, there was a Prime Ministerial Office meeting, and we received approval for this economic cooperation industrial complex project. And we had a summit recently, and this project was adopted as one of the agenda, and so there was a mutual agreement among the two countries. And you will see that in June, again, June of 2020, we received the approval from the Prime Minister's office, and our JV was established in September of this year, and we have begun with the construction of the project.
And next, let me explain about our marketing activities. Now, we carried out strategic marketing, and I can explain 2 points about this. First would be the product planning, and then the marketing for sales promotion. The Korean companies that are entering into the Vietnamese market were the target for our investment promotion activities. So we had a roundtable to promote investment. We also utilized special articles to promote this project. And one of the major characteristics of this industrial complex is that it is mainly for SMEs. So we put that in mind when we were preparing for the spaces within the complex. If you look at the right, you can see the brochure for promoting our industrial complex. And also, especially to the far right, this is actually a pamphlet that describes our project, and also that we are receiving applications for tenants into the industrial complex. We first had companies register for LOIs, letter of intent. We wanted to identify how much demand there would be. Then there was a letter of commitment that we received. The commitment, LOC, actually has more strict conditions that have to be met. And as you can see, in terms of the LOI, we received the LOI from around 100 companies. So this would mean that we were able to secure 151% of demand for the total land area that we would provide in terms of the letter of commitment. We received the LOC from 43 companies, meaning that they would cover about 90.7% of the space that would be provided. So if you look at the companies, the new companies that want to newly enter into the Vietnamese market accounted for 70% of the total companies, and those who are already in the Vietnamese market accounted for 30% of the applications. In terms of the different sectors, the industrial complex has outstanding location. That's why there was a lot of companies in the logistics area who wanted to take part. And then in terms of manufacturing, there are those in the automotive parts industry, electronics industry, and machinery. Next, I would like to explain about the 전말랑고 economic zone. 전말랑고 is a economic zone that we were able to plan for in the middle of Vietnam, the middle region, because the previous project was mainly targeting the northern part of Vietnam. So we decided that there also has to be a project targeting the middle region. So the region actually is within the 전말랑고 economic zone of the Thua Thien Hue province. And the land area would be 1,815 hectares. We wanted to carry out first stage targeting a land area of 380,000. So in September of 2019, we actually received a request from the Hue province government, and we're requesting for participation by 3 candidate regions. There was an MOU established in November of 2019, and then December of the same year, there was a commercial real estate service carried out to identify the demand. And then last year, we carried a preliminary feasibility study, and in June of this year, we were able to receive the intermediary report of the outcomes of the feasibility study. We have established a detailed plan and sent that to Hue province, and we have secured a priority position for carrying out this project. Let's talk about the economic zone in the middle region of Vietnam. So as you can see here in the map, there is Da Nang, area that a lot of Koreans visit. So this economic zone project is located centered around Da Nang because the 전말랑고 economic zone is located 30 minutes away from Da Nang. And also there's Jungushi, that's about 120 kilometers away from Da Nang. So 전말랑고 economic zone is very closely located to Da Nang, which is known to be the center of the middle region of Vietnam.
그래서 저희가 이제 앞으로 이제 저희가 그 중부 지방에 전말랑고 경제구에 대해서 저희가 역할은 일단은
in terms of the 전말랑고 economic zone, we will play the role of providing stable land, and also we will be working with private corporations and cooperate with them for strategic fostering of businesses overseas, especially in the Vietnamese market, the middle region. In the Indochina Peninsula, the 전말랑고 economic zone actually can play an important role in terms of the transportation or logistics because it serves as a corridor that connects to the east and the west, and we believe that this economic zone has great potential. So this is the basic land utilization plan, and also another image that you can see here, and it shows a 380,000 pyong of land. So here you can see there is the high-tech industry area, and you just saw the aerial view of the 전말랑고 economic zone. Next, I would like to talk about future implementation strategies. First of all, now VSIP is a Singaporean public corporation that has already entered into Vietnam. And we are actually benchmarking the project that VSIP has carried out in Vietnam. In the 1990s, the Singapore and Vietnam government partnership was established, and in 1996, for the first time, a JV was established between VSIP and Vietnam, like in the form of the JV that we established. And there are about 6 to 7 industrial parks that have been developed by VSIP.
사업 구조 측면에서 저희가 이제 벤치마킹하고 싶은 부분은
We want to benchmark the business structure, especially the fact that Semcorp is a Singaporean government corporation, and Semcorp actually participate in building this JV.
인증의 이제 최초 사업 이후에
After the initial project, Bangning, Haiphong,
응예한,
Eungyang, Gwangnai,
주식회사
you can see that the joint stock companies, many of them were established. So the original project has expanded in a step-by-step manner. The first step was the G2G partnership that was established between Singapore and Vietnam. And then after the initial development, you can see that there has been additional development projects. So this shows how cooperation can be maintained in a sustainable manner. And you can see that the operations are jointly carried out. The VSIP case actually is a case that we want to benchmark as we carry out cooperation with Vietnam.
이제 이게 이제 단계별 개발 방식인데요.
This is the step-by-step development that we foresee. This is actually the way that VSIP carried out its development projects. In the beginning stages, VSIP also mainly focused on building the industrial parks. But with the development of mainly industrial parks, later on that led to a demand for housing infrastructure. So as you can see in step 2, there was a development of the housing complexes. And then the last step, you can see that is a stage for complex development. So there is the industrial complex developed in combination with the housing complex, and various industries and services are located in this region. This is the business model that has been implemented by VSIP, and this type of business model is something that we would like to benchmark. The strategy for carrying out business, first of all, we want to reinvest in the follow-up projects. I explained this before, but the industrial complex that will be developed and also the Jeonmae-Dangko economic zone, you will see that in the case of the former project, as I mentioned, in the first stage, there will be a pilot industrial complex that will be developed, and the land area is 430,000 pyong. In step 2, there will be 800,000 pyong of land that will be developed into a industrial complex. And also at the same time, there is a 1.14 million pyong of urban area. And so in the first stage, and the second stage, and the third stage, there will be different developments that are carried out in a step-by-step manner. And also, in the case of the Jeonmae-Dangko economic zone in Hue province, 380,000 industrial complex pyong of industrial complex will be created, and then there will be housing complex that will be established, and the last stage will probably be the complex development. Lastly, the urban area will be developed, and the special economic zone will be developed in that manner. And next, we want to play the role of a public developer that cooperates with the private sector.
사업 구조를 통해서
I talked about the business model that has been carried out in a sustainable manner by VSIP, and that is what we would like to benchmark. We also want to cooperate with the private sector and have different roles work together.
이제 공공 입장에서
Now, because we represent the public sector, we can engage in negotiations with the government or propose for the business plan, and also in terms of the credit, for example, we can actually play the role of a public developer.
그렇게 저희가
And as a public developer, we can engage in partnership with the private sector, and the private sector can take on different roles. So if we play the role of a public developer,
베트남은
then
처음 시작입니다만 이제
because we are entering into Vietnam for the first time,
저희가 축적이 되어 있기 때문에
but nevertheless, we have a network already established and we have accumulated know-how. So we believe that there is further potential to develop in Vietnam. And there are many manufacturing companies that would want to enter into the Vietnamese market. So I think that there are great benefits that can be enjoyed through these projects that LH can participate as a public developer. So this is all that I have prepared 2 days later. Now, there is an investment roundtable that will explain the Korea-Vietnam industrial complex. And if you would like to gain more information about the projects that we pursue, then at 1 o'clock 2 days later, we have an investment roundtable coming up. So please participate, and we will be able to give you more information on our efforts and also accommodate your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. So we have completed the presentations for the first day of the best practices, and the Global Korea Convention webpage is offering the streaming services of the presentations as well as the video uploads. So I'd like to thank all of our presenters once again, as well as the participants for being with us throughout the program. And tomorrow we will have the second day of the best practices presentation. So we look forward to your participation tomorrow as well. Thank you very much.